Okay, welcome back teachers and tutors. Now let's look at the character analysis of Julius Caesar. The most interesting character and complex character in the play would be that of Brutus. And if you consider it, he's actually a tragic hero. He's a tragic hero because he has been brought about, his downfall has been brought about because of his one flaw, which is his obsession with honor and idealism. And he even interferes in Cassius's fundraising tactics to sustain his war and his men, his army. And it debatably makes a lot of bad decisions and is manipulated by Cassius and used as a pawn in his overcoming of Caesar's tyranny. And there's a true loyalty is Brutus's true loyalty is towards the Romans. And he's one of the most complex characters in Julius Caesar because he's neither good nor bad. In other words, it's very hard to pigeonhole Brutus into these kind of black or white categories. His intentions are good, but he ends up joining the bad side or on the side of the conspirators. So it's very interesting to study his motivations and underlying intentions for why he does what he does. Stay tuned for the character analysis of the other characters. Welcome back teachers and tutors. Now let's continue with the character analysis of Julius Caesar. And let's look at Julius Caesar himself, the man who is greatly awed and is considered very ambitious and arrogant by the Roman people. When you actually look at this, he's an elderly person. He's also deaf in one ear. And he has a lot of frailties and weaknesses which he hides from the public eye. And he's considered a tyrant. But we have to look at the question, was he really a tyrant? And he vies for absolute power over Rome. Alright? And his immortal influence, when Decius says they intend to crown him king, he actually succumbs to temptation and offers to go to the capital. So the fact that he is eager to become king tells us that he was probably ambitious. There's a part in the play where there's the Mount Olympus speech when Metellus Cimber tries to plead for his banished brother. Caesar says when Caesar is like the northern star speech. Caesar is like the North Star who is ever fixed in its temperament and his constancy will not be moved or shaken by any tempest or any of these base fanal spawning. In other words, he's saying that these people can try as much as they want, but he will not be moved, and once his mind has been made up, it is made up forever. And the fact that he refers to himself in the third person, Caesar shall forth. When Caesar says do this, it is performed, and etc. etc. It tells us that he is very egotistical. He is looking up to himself and having a very pompous image of himself, which is not very well liked by his conspirators, especially Cassius, who is the main conspirator and plotter in this conspiracy for the assassination of Caesar. So his own arrogance brings about his own downfall. Stay tuned for the character analysis of the other characters. Okay, welcome back teachers and tutors. Now let's look at the character analysis. A key character to consider during the character analysis is Mark Antony himself. Mark Antony is a young man at the beginning of the play. When he runs in the Feast of the Lupercal, he is actually running in the competition for other young, fertile men like him, so as to touch Calpurnia using his wand. And when he does that, so that she could become less barren. And then he's one of the best orators in the play. If you consider the part where Brutus, upon addressing the Roman people, tries to manipulate them into accepting them as the new rulers of Rome, Mark Antony enters into the scene and then says, oh, these are honorable men, these are honorable men. And then he tries to turn the commoners against the conspirators. So his ability, his oratorical skills are very, very pronounced in this scene, and as such we see him as the best orator of the play. And he's able to think on his feet. He was really able to devise a plot through which he could manipulate the mob. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been turned into that frenzy where they actually kill Helvius Cinna and they charge after the conspirators' houses. So it is very commendable and very impressive the way in which
Mark Antony is able to turn the mob against the conspirators through his oratorical skills and through his poetry. And if you consider the fact that he's a very consummate politician, it's also very interesting because later on in the play, when Brutus and Cassius are waging war against Mark Antony and Octavius, he's really able to be a very good consummate politician and then consider Lepidus's qualities as a good ruler in the triumvirate, etc., etc. So he's a very consummate politician who doesn't have any conflict with his fellow rulers, as in the case of Brutus and Cassius. Very unlikely. Brutus and Cassius ran into a conflict of interest when Cassius accepts bribes. But in the case of the triumvirate on Octavius and Lepidus and Mark Antony's side, we have Mark Antony being very stable in his position. And then he also reads people well. In all instances, he's really able to gauge the conspirators' reaction, whether they will be able to stand and attack on their character. He's also able to read the mob's mentality very well, and he's able to read or predict the downfall of Brutus and Cassius later on in the play when they wage war against them. So it's very interesting how he's able to read situations and people's character very well. And unlike Brutus, he's very loyal to Caesar. So a classic illustration of this comes during the funeral speech, when he's really able to weep for his fallen friend and then expose his robe, so to speak, where he has been stabbed by each one of the conspirators. He addresses each one of the conspirators and openly weeps for his fallen friend. Not only that, he also mentions the contents of Julius Caesar's will, which he has bequeathed a lot of his riches to the Roman people, and as thus he incites the outrage of the Roman people, and this is a classic testament of his loyalty to Caesar. And Antony never separates his private affairs from his public actions. This is very interesting because unlike Brutus, who prides himself in acting solely with respect to virtue and building himself to his personal concerns, but Brutus usually blinds himself to his personal concerns, such as by refusing Portia the consents of his mind, and by refusing to confide in her during the garden scene. But in stark contrast, Mark Antony is really able to bridge his personal self with his private self, personal private with his public self. Okay, welcome back, teachers and tutors. Let's continue with the character analysis. Let's consider the character of Cassius. Cassius is about the same age as Brutus. He has a lean and hungry look, as noticed by Julius Caesar at the beginning of the play, when he confides in Brutus that Cassius has a very mean look, and he looks very ambitious and not very at ease with himself. In other words, he seems to be posing a threat to Julius Caesar's rising popularity and power. So, and in a very real sense, he's very right, because as later on in the play we witness that Cassius is the mastermind of the conspiracy. He enlists people into the conspiracy, such as by throwing forged letters into Brutus's garden, saying that the commoners actually want Brutus to join the conspiracy against Caesar, so that Rome can be rid of Julius Caesar's tyranny. And we see that Cassius is also very unscrupulous in his means of enlisting Brutus's help for the conspiracy, and he is the main villain of the play. And he's envious of Caesar's rising popularity. There's this quote when he says, while we petty men walk under his huge legs, like while he stands and bestrides the world like a colossus. So he's referring to Julius Caesar's rising popularity and his great ambition and his tyranny, where the rest of the men, they are being underlings. As he says, the fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are thus and thus. So in other words, he says that he's saying to Brutus that they are underlings to Caesar, not because the fault lies in their astrology or luck, but because they choose not to do anything about their fates as subordinates to Julius Caesar. So in a very real sense, he can be seen as believing in determinism and believing in the power of free will. and he manipulates his friend. He manipulates Brutus into joining the conspiracy through unscrupulous means. He's very ambitious. In other words, he wants to be the next leader, the next ruler of Rome, and he reads people well, but Antony is better. Like if you consider the funeral speech, he actually addresses Brutus's concern for letting Mark Antony speak in the funeral speech after the conspirators. Cassius says something like, "Oh, do not let Mark Antony speak after us, because I fear him for his ungrafted love that he bears to Caesar." In other words, Cassius is afraid of letting Mark Antony speak in the funeral of Caesar in front of the Roman people, because if he's allowed to do so, then he might be able to turn the mob against the conspirators by saying mean things about the conspirators and by speaking highly of Caesar. And in a very real sense, he has been proven right. Later on in the play, we do see this happening when Mark Antony actually is able to turn the mob against the conspirators. Okay, Cassius wrongly assumes defeat in battle, thus leading to his seaside. When he watches his own army men actually passing through the gate, he actually assumes that they have been captured by the enemy troops, which is by Octavius and Mark Antony's side. But in reality, it is his own man gathering with his own men. So in that sense, he's very foolish when he actually commits a suicide. That leads to the eventual downfall of his side of the army, thus leading to the eventual defeat of Brutus and Cassius' side. So that was definitely very short-sighted on his part.